Is she going to ensure that none of her members were involved in shutting down democracy?
Tonight, the Premier accuses an NDP MLA of orchestrating yesterday's protest inside the House that temporarily cleared the Assembly. Also, community pushback about a potential shelter for people with complex needs in Saskatoon. Plus, we'll take you to Lucky Man Cree Nation, where the community is getting a fresh start from the bones of a grain elevator.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Tuesday, November 21st, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening and thanks for watching. Question period in the Saskatchewan Legislature was interrupted by chanting protesters on Monday. They came to the Assembly calling on the government to ask for a ceasefire in Gaza. Today, Premier Scott Moe accused an NDP MLA of colluding with the protesters.
There's a question on the floor of this Assembly for the Leader of the Opposition. Is she going to ensure that none of her members were involved in shutting down democracy for the first time in the history of Saskatchewan? And if so, Mr. Speaker, is she courageous enough to meter out the consequences necessary?
Moe was speaking about Saskatoon University MLA Jennifer Bowes, who stood as the protesters chanted. The debate was suspended. In response to all questions from opposition leader Carla Beck, Moe asked her if she would remove Bowes from caucus. Beck told reporters afterward that Bowes did not assist in organizing the protest and would not be punished. Bowes says she spoke with constituents and encouraged them to attend and shared information on social media, but did not participate in organizing the event.
The residents of Saskatchewan that were here stood. I stood with them in solidarity, and I stand by that. I think that they were expressing a great deal of hurt and anger, and I think their reasons for being here are legitimate, and I will always stand with the people of this province when they are coming here to exercise their democratic rights.
The Premier referred to Bowes as an extremist. Bowes says if the government wants to paint her as a radical for standing for human rights, then they can call her that. The NDP has called for a ceasefire so humanitarian aid can reach Gaza. Premier Scott Moe says the government does not share that position. He says the ceasefire was broken when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. The federal government has unveiled the latest plans for the Canadian economy. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland delivered the fall economic statement in the House of Commons today. Rafi Boudjikanian has the details.
Chrystia Freeland is trying to tackle affordability issues while keeping an eye on the bottom line. Beneath that tightrope, a worsening economy ahead.
Our economic plan is focused on building an economy that works for everyone, with good jobs that people can count on.
The new spending outlined today is modest, $21 billion over 6 years, most of it aimed at housing and previously announced programs such as heat pumps and the removal of the GST for rental construction units. It is a sign the government doesn't want to add to the inflationary fire.
I am today announcing new measures through our economic plan to build thousands upon thousands upon thousands of new homes across the country.
There's a $15 billion loan program starting in 2025 to kickstart construction of new rental housing units. And the government also intends to cut down on red tape, allowing construction workers to move across the country more easily to build these new homes.
They recognize the scale of this problem is enormous, it's historic.
But for this observer of the economy, these are measures that will barely start addressing the housing shortage in the country.
This is not something that's going to get solved in this fiscal update or even in the next budget. We'll be talking about this in the next election and probably the next election after that.
An issue for the official opposition for months, engaging again today as the ink was still drying on the economic statement.
It now takes 25 years to save up for a down payment in Toronto. You used to pay off a mortgage in that time. Since this Prime Minister has taken office, families have stretched out the terms of their mortgages to 90 years.
Affordability is likely to be on Canadians' minds next time they're at the ballot box as they weigh how well the government has balanced spending with restraint in the middle of global uncertainty.
Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
A former SLGA liquor store in Saskatoon may soon be converted into a shelter for people with complex needs. But there's pushback from the neighboring community. Residents and business owners are concerned it could increase violence and crime in the area. Ashwarya Duda reports.
We clean up needles on the property twice a week. We frequently, because of the setup out back, have people sleeping out there. We've had some fires lit. We've had break-ins into the space. With the shelter across the street, that is only going to serve to exacerbate things for the whole area.
The Saskatchewan government wants to open a complex needs shelter with 15 beds at Idlewild and 38th Street West. It would be a place where police could bring in people who are intoxicated or behaving in a way that may be dangerous to themselves or the public. Area residents tell CBC they're out of the loop and anxious about having the space in their community.
Our biggest concern is that people will be held for 24 hours and released with no services. That's the whole neighborhood's biggest concern is bringing folks in with complex needs and no services to provide to them.
The property is owned by the province, and under the bylaw, it can open right away, but only for 6 months. The project needs City Council approval to open for up to 18 months. That's coming up for debate Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. The facility will be staffed by healthcare professionals providing a 24-hour window for individuals struggling with addiction or mental health issues.
These shelters do not belong in residential neighborhoods. Now, people will say this is in light industrial, but it's still a certain distance away from residential neighborhoods.
Area Councillor Darren Hill says he has many questions for the government representative who will be at Wednesday's council meeting. The biggest one, where will people go once they're discharged?
You don't want that facility to become a congregating area for people that have been in there and people that know them, and especially when they're coming out of that facility and just might be looking for another fix, then that will impact the neighborhood.
Residents and business owners say they should have been informed sooner and consulted before the proposal went to council. As for the council meeting Wednesday, they're hoping for clarity about discharge plans, the security contract, and what health services may be provided in the facility. Ashwarya Duda, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Regina police say they're ready to take full advantage of 15 new emergency shelter spaces planned for Regina. The province announced the spaces last month for people with complex needs. New data released by Regina Police shows between 2018 and July of 2023, officers made nearly 7,800 arrests for public intoxication. The interim chief of the police service says intoxicated people are sometimes taken to city cells because there's nowhere else for them to go.
I would say we will utilize 15 beds with individuals for sure within the city of Regina, and we'll continue to have discussions with the province and that support piece, because ultimately the support is what's necessary for these individuals. Support not just on the health side, but with their addiction issues as well.
Data shows public intoxication is also a problem in Saskatoon. Between January of 2022 and August of this year, 31% of arrests brought into the Saskatoon Police Detention Centre were booked in only for being intoxicated by drugs or alcohol, meaning they'd committed no crime. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations is accusing the Saskatchewan and federal governments of withholding income assistance for First Nations citizens. Saskatchewan First Nations chiefs are calling on both levels of government to rescind a policy that withholds income assistance for some recipients. The federal government works with communities to resolve outstanding specific claims about past wrongdoings through negotiated settlements. But now, the provincial and federal government's financial policy withholds income assistance from First Nations citizens who receive per capita distributions from those specific claims of more than $15,000. FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron says this goes against their treaty rights.
That is our stronghold here going forward. What they've done, this unilateral decision, no communication, unbeknownst to any chief, unbeknownst to the FSIN, and how they're taxing the poorest of the poor. The poorest of the poor. My message to Scott Moe was this: why would your government do such a harmful act.
Social Services says the government recently sent a letter to the FSIN indicating the ministry is reviewing its policy on per capita distribution payments for First Nations members receiving income assistance benefits and welcomes conversation and feedback from First Nations leadership. The ministry says it currently exempts per capita distribution payments for its First Nation members receiving income assistance benefits up to $15,000 per member per settlement. The province is calling on Ottawa to redraft its clean electricity regulations, calling the regulations unattainable, unconstitutional, and saying they will make power unaffordable in the province. The regulations are part of the federal emissions reduction plan and a goal to reach net zero by 2050. The feds want to implement regulations on electrical grids so that sector can reach net zero by 2035. Saskatchewan's Crown Corporation Minister says the province is on board with the goal, but the timeline isn't feasible.
By 2035, we just have very few options. We know that we're going to have a growing demand on the grid. We know that we have a growing province. SaskPower is forecasting out what their demands will be on the grid, and the numbers just don't work.
Saskatchewan's grid relies heavily on fossil fuels and natural gas, and Duncan says meeting regulations would require technology that's not in action yet. He says the cost of power here would more than double by 2035. Duncan says the government wants to go with its own plan to overhaul electricity generation by 2050. The University of Saskatchewan's Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization, also known as VIDO, has been awarded a significant contract in the United States. It comes from the United States National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. VIDO is one of only 7 organizations chosen and the only one not based in the U.S. The Vaccine Development Center will have an expanded scientific team, establish containment level 4 capacity, and build a new animal facility to house a variety of species. The 7-year contract is worth up to $30 million U.S. Members of the Ukrainian community gathered inside the Saskatchewan Legislature today to commemorate the 90th anniversary of the Holodomor.
Today, we as individuals and groups have the information, the knowledge, and the voice to shine light on the history of the genocide in Ukraine, the Holodomor. Today, I share with you this message from our National Ukrainian Canadian Congress. We, Ukrainians, are resilient people. We were not defeated through centuries of persecution and occupation.
The man-made famine was created by the Soviet Union and resulted in the starving death of millions of Ukrainians between 1932 and 1933. Prayers were said and a moment of silence was held to honor those lives. Speakers also acknowledged the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and the efforts being made to help newcomers fleeing from Ukraine. This is the 15th year the government of Saskatchewan has marked this day. That was another nice, uneventful weather day in southern Saskatchewan. This is how things looked in Regina today. Things are pretty quiet on the weather radar, at least for now. And while we've got a cold couple days coming up, it looks like we're going to see a warm rebound too. Ethan will tell you all about it in his forecast after the break. Stay with us. Lucky Man Cree Nation near North Battleford is starting to build a community from the ground up. The First Nation has reserved land for decades, but no houses. As they start to build, they're going net zero. Dane Patterson takes us there.
This First Nation in west central Saskatchewan has 3,000 hectares of land, but just one house, the one being built behind us. And it's built from recycled wood from an old grain elevator.
Well, here it is.
It's one of a few dozen they're planning to build as part of a net zero community.
The first Lucky Man net zero home.
The chief of Lucky Man Cree Nation is stepping inside this house for the first time.
I'm just thankful and grateful that
Chief Crystal Okimau pushed for design that would cut down on power bills and greenhouse gas emissions.
you always think about the generations behind you coming, and you want to leave. I'm aware of climate change, so we just want to limit our carbon footprint as a nation.
The timber for this house came from here.
Old grain elevators that were carefully dismantled, and instead of all this wood being hauled to the dump, it's being recycled.
It's a delicate process, unlike the alternative.
It aligns with the stewardship of Mother Earth, right?
This green construction design consultant says using wood that didn't have to go through the harvesting and processing chain reduces the carbon footprint.
The idea was to reuse this mass timber, which is really strong, and it's in really good shape, as you can tell. It's 100-year-old wood we're standing on, right? Doesn't look like it, does it?
He also says it's well insulated and built to last.
So this is the mass timber outside wall.
Unlike most First Nations, Lucky Man Cree Nation never had a community on reserve. But with some federal money, it's finally ready to build on its land.
I'm glad that we got a home, a land that we call it a home. I would come and live here anytime.
And the road is the first thing that we need?
Yeah.
They've drawn up a master plan and hope to get more federal dollars. Chief Okimau says she's optimistic the community will be built net zero for the future. Dane Patterson, CBC.
This weather update is brought to you by Titan Automotive, proud member of the Capital Automotive Group.
And our weather specialist, Ethan Williams, joins me now. I'd like to personally thank you for dealing with the wind. I felt very victimized by it yesterday.
Yes, well.
But it was a little chilly this morning.
Yeah, there was a bit of a chill in the air today in some parts of the province, and depending on where you were, things are really, really chilly. Take a look at this temperature contrast that we have in the province right now. At nearly 30-degree difference between our hotspot in Maple Creek, which is at 14 degrees above freezing, and Stony Rapids at 13 degrees below freezing. And part of the reason for that is we have this low pressure system in Alberta, and there's a bit of a temperature boundary here. Warmer air surging in from the southwest, and the further north you go, cool Arctic air has moved in. And even as you just kind of zoom into south and central Saskatchewan, we can see that sharp contrast when you look at a temperature in, say, Hudson Bay at -6, and again, Maple Creek around 14, or even Leader at 10. Regina, Saskatoon, we're caught somewhere in between, right about at the freezing mark right now. And if you're in Maple Creek, this actually was the 10th day so far this month that you were above 10 degrees for a daytime high. Usually in the month of November, you only see about 5.5 days like that, so you're pretty much almost double at this point. Even Swift Current, 4 days so far above 10 degrees, and your average is just below that. So trending a little on the warmer side, not so much though over these next 24 hours. That Arctic front dropping southward. And overnight tonight, the far north of the province seeing lows into the -20s, wind chills into the -30s. That just keeps dropping further south as we head through tomorrow and into the early morning hours on Thursday, where it's south and central's turn to get some pretty dangerous wind chills. So frostbite a concern province-wide for these next couple of days. Now, part of the reason that we're seeing this as well is the jet stream. You see the kind of trough that's being developed here. The jet stream basically just off to our west, and we're being caught in the Arctic air. But things do moderate as we head through the rest of the week, and we will see a return to some more seasonal conditions as we head toward the weekend. Now, a little bit of snow also possible in southwestern corner of the province tomorrow. Maple Creek, Val-Marie, maybe a couple of centimeters there. But then high pressure begins to clear that out as we head into Thursday. That's also what's bringing down that cold Arctic air from the north, clearing things out. And the good news is we won't have to contend with a whole lot of wind, but even with just a little bit of wind with temperatures that cold overnight, wind chills, of course, going to be a concern. For Regina, our temperature will actually drop through the day tomorrow. We'll get to around -5 or so with probably more cloud than sun, I would say. Then Thursday's our real chilly day with those very chilly overnight lows, and then things rebounding as we head into the beginning of the weekend, and some cloud cover, though, to start next week. For Saskatoon, again, you'll probably be dropping to around -5 or so. Breaks of sun here and there. Chilly day Thursday before getting almost above freezing on Saturday with a little bit of wind, and then temperatures near seasonal through Sunday and Monday. So just a little bit of a bump in the road here, Sam, and then back to normal.
We've had a pretty nice November, not much to complain about.
We really can't, no.
All right, thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
Truckloads of gravel are being dumped around a nearby geothermal energy plant in Iceland amid fears of an impending volcanic eruption. It provides power to much of the area southwest of Reykjavik. Officials say there could be less than 30 minutes warning before an eruption. The area has been largely empty for the past 2 weeks. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. Enrollment in many journalism schools is dropping, so administrators are looking for new ways to attract and keep students. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson has more.
So I was between Humber and Ryerson.
Fernando Bossois came all the way from Brazil to study journalism in Canada.
Journalism is a pillar of democracy, right?
Then found out his program at Humber College Lakeshore is pausing admissions after this year due to low enrollment. Last year, his class had 7 students. Now, it's down to 4.
It doesn't make for a good student experience, right? Because a good part of journalism school is to have the debate and the different opinions.
In the last year, low enrollment forced 6 journalism programs at Canadian post-secondary institutions to either close doors or pause admissions. University of Regina pressed pause.
It has a long and rather we think, distinguished history. So we wanted to give it a chance to restructure itself, reform itself, in the hopes of attracting new students.
The reasons range from changes within the industry, including major layoffs, to younger generations' lower interest in traditionally delivered news.
You hear from other students as how we're not taking journalism, that they say, like, why are you taking this? Like, there are not really jobs available.
But it's not all bad news. The top journalism schools in the country, like Toronto Metropolitan University, Carleton, or Concordia, are noting robust or even growing enrollment. What these schools say they've done is updated lessons to include more contemporary approaches to storytelling, including journalism and social media, podcasting, and data journalism. Programs also have to take a hint from what young people see as troublesome practices in mainstream journalism, says this professor.
For example, coverage of issues related to race, sexuality. So I think in our education and training, we need to reflect this paradigm shift.
I still see news from back home.
As for Fernando Bossois, he will complete his program and wants to be part of a generation that breathes fresh air into an industry at a crossroads. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
And Ethan's back with one last look at your weather.
Enjoy the warmth while we've got it in Regina and southern Saskatchewan tonight. It's actually going to be not bad, down to 1 degree at midnight, still above the freezing mark. A little bit of wind under partly cloudy skies, but things almost clouded over by the time we get to the morning, and our temperature starting to drop. -3 by 8 a.m. By the noon hour, we're down to -5 with that cloud cover building in, and it just keeps dropping as we can continue to head through the day. Saskatoon, a little cooler at midnight tonight with that cloud cover fully in place. May see a few breaks of sun by the time we get to tomorrow morning, but we've dropped to around -6, and by the time we get to the noon hour, not really going anywhere. This is where we'll sit, and of course continue to drop. Winds not too bad, looking at cloudy conditions, and then of course those freezing temperatures kicking in for the overnight hours. Sam.
Yay!
Can't wait.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And that's it for us tonight. For News Anytime, you can always head to our website. You could subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel, or go download the CBC News app on your phone. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night. Stay warm.